Hello, welcome back to CS++. This is our 6th lesson in our Intro to Programming Using JavaScript series. And today we're going to look at functions. So we are going to look at what is a function, how we can create functions that have parameters, and how we can create functions that have return values. And then we'll look at how we can create some global variables that will exist in all functions. We'll finally look at the difference between functions and methods, which we've already been using, and then we'll create an assignment where we'll do a few different things. We will create a simple function where it greets them by name. We'll do another one where it's a counter, but this counts persistently, so it doesn't get reset every time. We'll create a function to get a random number. We'll create a function that adds two numbers together, one that figures out the distance between 2 points, and then finally one that takes two parameters, the total bill, and then what percent you want to tip, and it will return that value. So let's get started. So what is a function? Well, this is just a reusable block of code, and you're going to define it very similar to how you are going to define a variable, except instead of using let, we're going to use the word function, and then we're going to have parentheses afterwards, which sometimes you'll see will have things in it, which are called parameters, and then we'll open a block statement, kind of like we did for if statements and loops. So in this very first one, this is creating a function called sayHello. Our naming convention still applies. We usually use lowercase letters and camel case. So every time I call sayHello, and calling it means you just say the name of the function with parentheses afterwards, it will just call whatever's inside of this block of code. So we're defining it up here, and then these two lines are going to call it. So this is going to allow us to reuse code. So now we can just say hello, and we can say that as many times as we want, and it'll just keep saying hello, hello, hello. This seems pretty simple, but imagine if you had 50 lines of code inside of here. Now this one command will do 50 lines of code over and over again. So you might want to do something a little bit different every time you call it. So this is where we can put parameters in. So in JavaScript, you just say the name that you want to call that parameter. You don't have to say let or anything in there. You just say name. So in this case, when you call greet with a string Alice in there, it'll say hello Alice, and it'll concatenate that name. And then if you put Bob in or something different, then it will use that name. So now calling greet Alice or greet Bob will give you two different unique outputs. And in these cases, we're just alerting it. You can also have multiple parameters. So these are going to be separated by a comma. So here I have X and Y. So if you put two numbers in like 3 and 5, it's going to alert the addition of those two numbers. Right? So if you put numbers in, this isn't from a user, this is just hard-coded in. These are numbers, so they will add together. You also have the option to send some information back to where you called it. So if we wanted to double a number, we can call that number n. Then we can, instead of alerting it, we can return this back. Right? We very briefly saw the return statement just getting out of a function, but now we're using it to send some information back. So return semicolon would just get out of the function immediately, but return n times 2 would multiply n by 2 and then send that back and then get out of the function. So if you say double 5, then it's going to store result in here as 10. So it again automatically exits the function as well as possibly sending a value back to whoever called it. So you can also have something where you expect for something to be returned, but you forgot to return it. In this case, it will still work. It won't crash your program, except the value is going to be undefined, which you can check to see if it's equal to undefined, which you probably don't want to happen. You could also create variables outside of the function. If you do this, every time you update this, it will update count. So this line of code will only happen when the page loads. So we'll set count to 0, and then every time we increment, it's going to add 1. So it's 1, then 2. And any function can use count if you define it outside of the scope of the function. If you were to define let count equal 0 inside the function, then every time you called increment, it would reset to 0 first. So it's very important to put that on the outside. So the difference between a function and a method is a function is something that stands on its own that you create, and a method belongs to a value, so to another class. So to the math class or to the string class. So you can kind of think of methods as functions that somebody else made, and functions are ones that you made. So let's get into the assignment. So let's go to index.html. And you'll see there's a lot of stuff on this page. So let's open this in the preview. And then once that pops up, we want to make sure we open that in the browser. So now what we're going to see is instead of using prompts and alerts, we're going to start to get to using elements on the actual page. So here we have a text field and a button. Here we have a button. Here we have a value. And same thing, we have numbers here that we can put in to find the distance and the tip and everything. So this is what we're going to be doing next unit. So for now, what we're going to do is we are going to just use this stuff. And when you jump over to script.js, if you scroll to the bottom, you will see that there are some click handlers pre-written for you. So again, we're going to do this in the next unit by getting the element by ID and the text and the buttons and everything. But for now, we're just going to assume that these things work. So if you fill in things like greet and myFunc, they should automatically get called and they should go grab the stuff for you. So you can just assume that the name is already going to be what is getting put into the name field right here. So again, next unit, in unit 7, we'll see how we can do that on our own. So let's go step by step through this. So the first one is we're going to be getting that when we click the button, we're going to be getting what's in the text field. So all we have to do here is just return the greeting. So we can use the lowercase return to do this. And then all we have to do is concatenate a string, which is just hello, comma, space, plus whatever name they put in, which needs to match this right here, and then plus an exclamation point. And so now every time they click that, we should see hello pop up where the helper that we don't have to worry about yet puts it. So if we go back over here and refresh, then we could put something, this is refreshing still, we can put in something like Bob and then click greet, and now you will see it automatically will write to the screen hello, comma, space, Bob, which looks great. And if you want, you can change it to Bobby, hit greet again, and it will update that on the fly. So we're worried right now about writing these functions. In the next one, we'll see how we can grab information from here, add an event listener, and then display it on the screen. All right, let's go to the next one, the persistent counter. So this is a function that basically tells you how many times you've clicked the button. So we want to make sure that we have a global variable. So it doesn't have to be at the top of the page. It usually makes sense to organize things, but it just needs to be outside of the functions. So here I can do let count equals 0. So again, this is outside of a function. So this just happens when the page loads. And then inside of here, we want to write the code. So this is step 2. So to add 1 to count, you can simply just say count plus plus. And then we need to return that new count value. So it's just return count. So again, this one doesn't need any parameters, so you would just have to use empty parentheses when defining the function. And let's go try that again. So we can go refresh our HTML page, and you can click this. It says 1, 2, 3, so it'll just keep going. If you refresh it again, it'll go away and restart the counter at 1. But as long as you don't refresh, it'll keep that counter persistent. All right, the next one is going to be get a random number. And you're going to put a parameter in here that is the max. So what is the highest thing you want? So for this one, if max is not value, so it's not a number or 0 or negative, you want to return 0. So this one does have a little bit of a check, but it's pretty simple, right? You just have to check to see if max is not a number. So is NaN of max, or if max is less than 1 or less than or equal to 0, either way is fine. Then what do you want to do? Well, it says right there, you just want to return 0. And if it's not, you want to return a random number between that value. So Math.random is going to be kind of useful because it's going to return a number between 0 and 1, which is a decimal number, but it will not include 1. So we have to do a little bit of math to this to make it between the 1 and the max as an integer. So we can do Math.random, which is a method, so we need the parentheses at the end. So that right there, that will give you something between 0 and 1, which could be useful if you wanted to flip a coin. You can just say if it's greater than 0.5, it's heads. Otherwise, it's tails. Or if you had 4 people playing a game, you just give them all a random number. Whoever has the highest number wins. But we don't want to do that. We want a bigger range, so we can multiply by the max. Which now, if the max is 100, it's going to give us a number between 0 and 100, not including 100. So what we want to do to that is we want to round it down. And the reason we want to round it down is because we want to make sure that it is not, because it could be exactly 0. So if you try to round up and it was exactly 0, then it could stay at 0. So you could have a number between 0 and 100. So we want to round it down, and if we want to shift it over, we can just add 1 to it. So we can just say +1. So multiplying by this is the range, and then this is where you want to start, or where you want to shift over from 0. And that should be good. So let's try that one out. So refresh your page. Maybe I put 100 here. Generate random. So here we have an error. So what you can do is you can right-click, inspect your element. You can click on your error here. So is NaN, you'll notice that this is not capitalized, the second N. So that doesn't exist. So that's how you would find your error if you did not see it. So right here, that N should be capitalized. So now when you go back and you refresh it, now if you put a number in here, let's say 10, you'll see 6, 8, 1, 2, 3, 6. If you keep going, you should see 1 through 10. There's 10, and you wouldn't be able to see a 0 or an 11. So that seems to be working. There was a 1. All right, so for the next one, this is just a simple adder, right? So this is just showing you how you can use 2 parameters. So all we're doing here is we are just making sure, first of all, they're not strings, and second, they are being added together. So we can just return, we can do this in one line. We can just return, I don't know if this said anything about integers or numbers, so we'll just do parse float of x, and then we're just going to add it to parse float of y. And that should add those 2 together. So the distance one is, again, not too complicated. We'll just assume for this one they're actually putting in numbers for this one. But for this one, we can calculate the difference between x2 and x1 and then square it. And then we can add those 2 together, and then we can take the square root of it. So we can actually do this all in one step if we want. So if we wanted to do it all in one step, well, let's do it in 2 steps. Let's create a variable first. So let's let d equal Math.sqrt. So we're going to take the square root of the difference of x2, which is the name of the variable that they passed, minus x1. To square that, probably the easiest way to do it is asterisk asterisk 2. And then we want to add that to the difference of y2 minus y1. And then we want to square that as well. So that should be the distance formula. And then if you look, you just need to round that to 2 decimals. So we can just return d.toFixed with a 2 as a parameter, which means give me 2 decimal points. So before we do the calculate bill, let's check those last 2. So myAdder, let's do 4 and 5. If you add it, you get 9. That looks good. Let's just put a couple random points in here. Find the distance, 3.16. If you change one number, it should update that distance. And then the final one is going to be our bill calculator. So again, don't mess with any of the handlers down here. We'll see how we can write our own in the next unit. But again, this already gives you the function header, so tipCalculator, and the numbers, the names of the parameters being passed are bill and tipPercent. So you want to use those. So you could do this in a couple steps if you want. You could probably do it in less. But let's create the tip. So to figure out the tip, it's just the bill times, and then the tipPercent, which is going to be a whole number. So we want to divide it by 100 to get that percent. So tipPercent divided by 100. And then what we can do is we can add that to the total. So that would be, let's create another variable, let total equals the current bill plus the tip. And then we will return the total with 2 decimal points, so 2 fixed with a 2 in there. So you might have figured there's other ways to do this, right? You could have done 1 point, the tip, and then that would have been less steps, but this works as well. So let's go refresh our page. Let's create numbers that we know. So let's say the bill was 100 and we wanted to tip 7%. Then calculate tip. The total is going to be 107, which is perfect. So, and again, this one just says the number, right? You don't have to say the total is or anything like that. So that should be it. And we can see if those are correct by giving this a commit message and then committing and pushing. And then after a couple seconds, you can head on over to your GitHub repository. And again, once you do push that back to GitHub, it automatically triggers an action. And then you can see that over here. So if you open this, it'll give you the summary of it. And after a minute or so, it should automatically grade these. Again, if you want to dive in deeper to see exactly what's happening, you can click on that and you can see exactly what the tests are doing. So you might want to open up one of these like greet function when it's done. It also gives you a nice little report in there, but it can be a little overwhelming. So if you click on summary, then this will just show you that it's working. And then when it's done, it'll give you a nice summary of green check marks or red X's to see if you did anything incorrectly. And then you can go back to your GitHub code spaces and you can make those changes. And once you do, you can commit and push again. But we got 100 this time, so it looks good. So this is how we can write our own functions by using parameters if we need them, and also return types. In the next one, we're going to look at how we can interact with the HTML so we can grab information from the form fields and also get rid of the onclick so we can use something called an event listener. And we will do that next time. I'll see you then.